Hello, my name is Jimmy Smith here from West London Wine School, South London Wine School, Wine with Jimmy, and also Streatham Winehouse and Bear Green Winery. So welcome to a presentation here looking at the topic of communicating diversity within Rioja. So we are really looking at defining this topic. We're going to go through two key areas in terms of how Rioja communicates in the present, and we're going to look towards the future, how it can actually communicate diversity and the volume of diversity within this wonderful wine region. Before we really get stuck into it, I want to sort of set the scene where we're looking at. I'm going to go through a Google Earth video as well to sort of really bring it to life, and we'll go through then the present and on to the future. So first of all, then let's talk about the location of the region we're looking at. So we are, of course, in North Spain. We are this autonomous community located around the city of Logroño on the River Ebro. So we are bordered by the Basque Country to the north. That's both Navarra and the País Vasco. We have Castilla y León towards the most of the west and the south. And then we've got a little bit of Aragon as well as it heads towards Zaragoza. So that's our wine region. The DOCA of Rioja is about 100 kilometers long. So first of all, in terms of geography, it's not the largest, most expansive wine region that we find, but it is heavily, densely planted. And it has lots of small nooks and crannies, really, to produce this wonderful diversity. It's only about 1% of the total landmass of Spain. It's ranked 16th, and it's low in populace as well. Only around 320,000 people live in the region. So we've got a topic here about communicating diversity, how Rioja needs to communicate the wonderful volume of diversity the region has to offer. So first of all, let's define what we mean by diversity. So Rioja is a wine region that conveys considerable levels of diversity across multiple disciplines. So in essence, this could be historical through geography, climate, topography, geology, and things like human geography as well, all the way up to the human touch. There is a broad detail in diversity. The region offers copious amounts of various key indicators that can help market the region to a modern global market. Now, we're in a fast-paced world, and Rioja is a region which is adapting, but perhaps it needs to further change and embrace its key assets in order to broaden its appeal across the world. Now, people are specifically more interested in the authenticity of wine, cherishing the locality and the specificity of place, often known broadly in the wine trade as terroir. Now, I think this is something really we're going to sort of see a common theme through my presentation in terms of really focusing on location, on geology, on terroir, and seeing how that can really be promoted through the product of Rioja. This is Varsano's Finco La Carretas in the picture. You see lots of these beautiful pictures of the region. Okay, so talking about the present now, I was a part of this wonderful trip to Rioja with the Consejo Regulador, and we got to immerse ourselves really in the wonderful state that Rioja can be found in and the quality that is arising from this area. Now, the cultural beauty of this region is well marketed by the Consejo. And the key historical cities, the likes of Logroño, Haro as well, which has, of course, the Barrio Estación, so the train station, and villages as well that are typically very close to both those cities and located in between, north of the Ebro for the most part, and a little bit south. Things like Briones, La Guardia, San Vicente de la Sonsierra, which you see in this picture. All of these are very much embedded in the valuable marketing of the region. But there seems to be a preference to market this area, right? So Haro, La Guardia, Briones, and of course, places like Logroño as well. And that certainly is the promotion into export markets. We know, though, Rioja is more than just these important cities and larger towns. There are stunning valleys, there are high altitude sites, and of course, quaint outlying villages that really are very important in producing wine. They are the ones that can offer a broader sweep of diversity in the region. And there really is more to discover for everyone, including the hardened veterans of the region. And I know even people living within La Rioja and around northern Spain are always discovering something new within the region, some new hamlet, some new high altitude area, some new valley. Now, I'm going to show a quick video just so we can get some sense of the terroir of the region. So let's have a look. Okay, let's have a look. So we're going to identify some of the key areas. And this, of course, is a real important way to market the geography and topography of the region. It's only 2.5 minutes, but we'll have a look at it. Here we go. So here we are looking at North Spain. Of course, we're going to identify the autonomous region of La Rioja, first of all, just there in white. We're going to show you the topography. The north of the region has the Sierra Cantabria, or the southern foothills of it, which offers that protection from the northerly wind. Here you'll find some of the most fantastic and famous villages lying immediately to the south of this area, as we just mentioned beforehand. Now, to the south of the region, I think we'll be looking at next, hopefully. Here we go. It's going to happen very shortly, no doubt. Is the Sierra de la Demanda, the mountain range, which is a smaller mountain range, but offers a protection in the sort of southwesterly and southern section. And this is what offers the protection from the kind of heat of the Meseta. So you therefore have the valley. Of course, the Ebro intersects it. You'll see it just here, which is actually mainland Spain's main river. That's just Spanish, not talking about Portuguese shared rivers like the Tagus or the Duero, for example. But the Ebro here meanders its way through the middle. And of course, this is really the lifeblood of the region. Finding very important key cities. I'm sure we'll have a look at some of them. So here we are for Logroño, of course. Really important. The DOCA headquarters are based here. The Trail of the Elephants, lots of great gastronomy. And then into the northwest, we have the smaller city, the town of Haro, famous for the Estación, of course, and the first place to get electricity in Spain, along with Jerez. Now we're going to focus on some of those key historical areas. Here you'll see the Rioja Alavesa, which is in fact in the Basque country and holds many of the important villages as previously mentioned. This is the Rioja Alta, which has the largest concentration of vineyards laying to the south of that. And that holds those two together, really the famous places. But as mentioned, there is a brilliant opportunity to market the Rioja Oriental, previously named the Baja, all the way down to Alfaro, and of course with multiple key villages. And you can see that this goes seriously south as well, away from the Ebro. So you have very key parts of difference in those yellow zones. Okay, so more about the present of this region. Now, much of vinous Spain, with Rioja at the forefront, the general of vinous Spain, focus on winemaking legislation and labeling as key indicators to convey the wine's quality or the assumed quality. So, for example, the mandated maturation hierarchy that gives us Crianza, Reserva, and Gran Reserva is often the centerpiece of Rioja wine label. The required period time in oak, which is mandated, also must take place in barrels which are 225 litre. Now, in terms of going into the future, here, this is also something that may need to change. We are talking about the rules around oak aging, particularly the one that forbids the use of anything outside 225 litre. There seems to be an overemphasis of wood aging and not necessarily the sense of place, like provenance and terroir. Now, I'm not calling for an end to this at all, but I am calling for focus to be actually given to other areas. So there's always been this big push towards these gradings, of course. And I'm going to go into much more detail about these, but there is time certainly for other focuses to take root. And also just to talk about the present here in terms of the success of the region. Now, Rioja is undeniably a region of success, the most so in the whole of Spain and one of the greats in the world. But with such growth, there have come tension, and there has certainly been stress in the infrastructure of the region. A few producer groups have formed to better promote the wines of like-minded producers and highlight the diversity of Rioja's wineries and wines. So we have Bodegas Familiares de Rioja, which is a small group of around 40 producers. And they promote their wines under this heading and campaign on issues that particularly affect smaller producers, such as the minimum stock holding for wineries registered to use the wine terminologies such as Crianza, Reserva, and Gran Reserva. Now, I'm not here to bash the DOCA Consejo Regidor Rioja. I am just talking about certain tensions that are currently here and ways that are probably, therefore, better to heal these tensions, these cracks for the future. Now, there has been a number of changes. Of course, Rioja is not just a sleeping giant. It's one that has reacted to institutions that have certainly voiced their opinions. And of course, we have seen changes in terms of focusing on the subzones, for example, Alavesa, Alta, and also Oriental. But actually, that's something that's relatively new. Rioja was a PDO without further geographical delimitations. And also, single vineyards and villages could not be named in the past. And of course, this gave kind of an emergence group, which is actually here on your slide. So we have the Basque Association or Bodegas de Rioja Alavesa, ABRA, and they have, of course, proposed a breakaway because of that inability to change earlier on. However, of course, this has changed and it's something that I am looking at now. This is really a catalyst. I'm showing this slide as a catalyst for change and then, of course, communicating the diversity in the region. So first of all, how do Rioja market themselves and how do communicators and educators like myself also help market La Rioja? So it's very important, firstly, to identify the success of the category, which is called generico or generic wine. Now, today, many of the protagonists of the region, maybe antagonists at time, people like Tim Atkin, MW, have called for real focus on these wines because there are so many great wines, and in fact, some of the greatest of La Rioja being produced within this category. In my cellar, for example, I have an ever increasing amount of wine from the likes of Miguel Marinho and Bodegas Artuque as well, amongst many others. Perhaps it's time to evolve the terminology generic, as that etymology is something that denotes lower quality, right? So perhaps it's a way of changing that and marketing that and communicating that in a more positive light. Of course, Joven is within this category. They're very much the same thing, but that's often seen as negative, young wine. And then, of course, there's Consejo or vintage, which is something rarely used, but maybe a little bit more positive. Is there a way of communicating this category, generic, young, for example, in a more positive light? Now, one significant key takeaway of the trip that I did in November 2022 was the quality found within this category at the mid-priced, but also at the premium end and everything in between. It really is time to talk about the diversity and elegance of the new Rioja. And it so often falls within this category, of course, because there is more flexibility in terms of winemaking and labeling under this category. Of course, the Condenada here from Artuque, which I think was one of the top winning wines in a very recent Tim Atkin report, or otherwise written by me, not really. So the further future here to focus on as well. So there has been broad attempts at this. We must start to focus on more geological zoning and understanding terroir. Now, there's been broad attempts. There is a map here of a very broad attempt at, of course, geological zoning. But there needs to be a commission to a detailed independent study of the landscape to establish a pyramid of quality along the same lines of Burgundy, for example. This will give us an identification of best named sites and things like Premier Crus and Grand Crus, of course, the etymology of which may be named different. So we should be really thinking about promoting Rioja top down, not necessarily bottom up. And this will enable Rioja to really stand shoulder to shoulder with the best regions in the world. Like we have in Burgundy, for example. One major example that immediately springs to mind for me is the quality of selection of premium white Rioja. This can certainly stand shoulder to shoulder in almost a similar sense of wine to white Burgundy. Some exceptional examples. And if we have the full promotion and marketing behind village, terroir, and of course, single vineyard sites, then this will be something which is really positive for the future. Here's another map for you. So something which was really of key interest to me was the experience in Rioja around the far west, and then also the Rioja Oriental, the eastern part of Rioja, there in kind of blue or purple. Now, the exposure of unearthing a geological study, plus supporting generic wines and all grape varieties, be it very small and local or major, this will enable Rioja and all of its ambassadors like me to promote the whole of this region very confidently and, of course, very passionately. Now, Rioja Oriental accounts for about a third of plantation, and it probably gets nowhere near that number in terms of local and international recognition. So if we start to really support these other areas like Oriental, it will enable municipalities in the more remote and unknown areas to gain recognition and aid a broader church of marketing of Rioja's very tangible assets. In really some great producers down here. There was Javier Ares-Corren of Ares-Corren, Bagordi, Ortega Esquerro, amongst many others who are making excellent wines as far as Alfaro in Tudela as well, which is a very key village, Quel down here too, amongst many others in many valleys of this area. Now, I've mentioned that there has been that movement, of course, towards identifying subzone, village and vineyard. There needs to be further support of the single vineyard scheme. Now, when the Consejo Regulador announced in June of 2017 that it was introducing this new tier of viñedos singulares, the move was really sort of heralded as revolutionary, very, very striking for such a traditional region. Now, of course, in essence, this system has always been there. The locality, the sites have names, they have history behind them, but it's of course unearthing them, surfacing them, so we are recognizing them and giving them an identity. So the creation of Viñedos Singulares category was a recognition of the trend. And it really is also a way of helping join the dots for the fine wine market of La Rioja. Of course, it had a degree of local skepticism to begin with, but it's turned out to be a commendable and serious process. And of course, in August of 2022, a very late edition was Alvaro Palacios Quignon de Valmaira, which is recognized widely as one of the best wines and vineyards of the region. So, of course, to bring Palacios into the fold for this, and with his support, will it actually prove a tipping point for many to follow in such a pioneer's footsteps? Other things here as well. Now, the region is so strongly associated with its signature grape variety, which is Tempranillo. And it's actually easy to overlook how quickly this grape variety has come to rule the DOCA of Rioja. As recently as 1973, Rioja contained more Garnacha than Tempranillo, and other varieties. There was much more diversity across the breadth of varieties we have. We know that Tempranillo is one of Spain's greatest assets as a grape variety. It's capable of extraordinary things in places like Ribera del Duero, lots of other DOs in Castilla y Leon, and of course, really head and shoulders above them all is La Rioja. It accounts now in this region for over 80%. The success is bred on quality, but also economic values. And there are also a big variety of clones available, which make them, of course, quite suitable for various sites. But there needs to be, of course, a focus on other varieties and communicating this beautiful diversity that one can find within the region. Also linking into something which is absolutely literally a hot topic is climate change. Tempranillo is starting to suffer. Other varieties must be focused on, and that's to combat the greatest threat to the global vinous world to date. Now, of all of the candidates that have handed in their CV to be a champion in these future years of climate change, Garnacha is surely the best suited, and also with such wonderful historical importance. Now, we've got a wonderful revival in place, small, localized revival of Garnacha, often in the Oriental, of course, with Ares Corren, as we had earlier, Bodegas Bilar, Carlos Sanchez, fantastic grape grower, making beautiful wines across the region. Cupani, Juan Carlos Sanchez, kind of the godfather of clones and obscure grape varieties, and things like Ramirez de Ganuza, amongst many others, and also kind of forward-thinking co-ops like Marquez de Reynosa. Now, many of these historical vineyards are loaded with low-density bush vines, old bush vines, which are capable of delivering exceptional high quality and immensely gorgeous wines. The problem, of course, has been keeping these old Garnacha vines in the vineyards. Hopefully that is changing as we are seeing the significant historical and quality importance of this variety. Now, with the Consejo's plan of marketing to help promote the virtues of other varieties like Garnacha, coupled with the education of ambassadors like me, and of course, key critics in the wine industry, we could look at turning, really, this is a turning point for the old school historical and important variety of Garnacha. What else could we see for the future? Now, it's not just about shifting Tempranillo to Garnacha. Maybe it's the focus on Tempranillo, on Garnacha, but also on other grape varieties. Now, we've got a lot of varieties which are very much rare and historically important, things like Cadrete, Mandon, Morate, but probably one of the most important I think I could identify, educational and historical, is Benedicto, which is the mother of Tempranillo. So much So much marketing behind that could be successful. It ripens a week after Temprano Tempranillo, the early variety. It's fresher with a pH which is typically 0.1 or 0.2 below Tempranillo, so the acidity is often more focused in Benedicto. And it has a very sort of tangy, intense, peppery personality, which often could actually link towards like Mencia or Syrah in terms of its aromatics. And it's arguably the most historical grape of them all, being the mother of Tempranillo. So really, really a big opportunity at focusing on this. Now, there's only small plantations of this. Luis Cañas in this picture have only a small selection of vines. But of course, there is time, there is opportunity to promote this. There is time to, of course, plant more of this in a Rioja that doesn't need more plantations, but this is certainly one which we could see just a little bit more of. And there's also a possibility of not just focusing on these other red varieties, but what about the white varieties and offering them as a part of a blend. Now, this is something which is historical in many regions in Europe, blending in white varieties into red. And of course, this is something like the pre-1970 model of Rioja. There are varieties allowed, of course, today, but we should see more of these to create more balance and more elegance in the wines. Of course, I'm not saying there isn't that already, but more of it. And that leads me on to white Rioja, of course. Now, even in today's markets, there is scant understanding that Rioja stands for more than just red wine. Most people just believe in it as, of course, red, and they don't know much else about it. Now, the standout event for me when I attended Rioja was the premium whites of Rioja. Really memorable and some truly stunning examples of wines here. I've mentioned this on other parts because this is an overlapping philosophy. But through real thorough understanding, skilled grape growing, and innovative and creative winemaking, the bar of quality was set exceptionally high for white Rioja. There is such an ability to promote these wines as fine wine and circulate them in the world as such, and the world of wine will take note. I've been including these wines within tastings of top wines, Burgundy whites, Pessac and Bordeaux whites, your top white wines of other key regions in Germany, Chardonnays around the world, and so on. So perhaps it's important to promote these in the correct channels, like gastronomy of the fine amount, key educational facilities like wine schools, of course, and even en primeur channels. Further diversity would be actually in promoting, of course, the other colors and other types of wines. So rosado wines are another wonderful medium to broaden the diversity through color. So we have, of course, delicate rosé wines, pink wines. We have very deep expressions. There is wonderful scope to communicate the complexities of this colorful category, and to help consumers understand that these wines can be consumed in a variety of scenarios and not just the summer months. Now, and there are many expressions being made. This is a fantastic producer, the Soigné, which was wonderful with more skin contact and things like cement, terracotta pots, making exceptional wines. Also, there's an important route to take in terms of the emergence of espumosos, of sparkling wines. Now, whilst there is friction within the cava category in Catalonia and all other autonomous provinces that can produce it, perhaps there is scope to further increase the awareness of sparkling wines through the multiple channels frequently mentioned already. So not necessarily cava, which can be produced in La Rioja, but sparkling wines. And this is small, but emerging. Vivancio, the museum, and also great producer and winemaker are producing some excellent expressions as well. And finally, I think it's important to bring something more topical in terms of diversity. And I wouldn't be the person I am if I hadn't mentioned this in a presentation. So rightly so, very topical. It's time to invest actually money and time and attention into the broader meaning of diversity within wine. So not just diversity in terms of climate, topography, geology, zoning projects, grape varieties, colors of wine, everything we've been listing in this presentation, but to talk about setting the correct moral compass to a direction that is imperative, but also help market Rioja as an inclusive and equal community to help further broaden its appeal. I've got the fantastic Melanie Hickman of Struggling Vines here. In this picture was one of the great women winemakers and grape growers that I had the pleasure of meeting on the trip in November 2022, which outlines the more sort of equality within gender in wine as well. So that will bring me then to the conclusion of communicating diversity for Rioja. And I hope you have enjoyed this presentation, Peter. And I hope it's covered as much as you would want about the current state of Rioja in terms of diversity and what it has to offer and perhaps what it needs to do in order to connect to the global market successfully, to really market this wonderful wine product and the diversity within it. So thank you very much. I have been Jimmy Smith, and see you very soon. Bye-bye.